everybody. I'm Suvarnang. Welcome back to the Khmer Post USA TV. I have the pleasure to interview the former President of Cambodia National Rescue Party, Mr. Sam Rainsy. We discuss a wide range of issues from the 2013 national election to his exile to the dissolution of his party before the 2018 national election. Cambodia has become a one-party state. Sam Rainsy and his top officials are barred from entering the country. Meanwhile, Cambodia will be the chairman of the ASEAN summit meeting next year. We discussed the importance of the regional and geopolitical power, the release of environmental and rights activists, but hundreds more political dissidents are still in prison. And finally, what is his hope for the 2023 national election? Here is my one-on-one interview with Mr. Sam Rainsy, the former CNRP president. Welcome, Mr. Sam Rainsy. Thank you for this opportunity speaking with you again. The country was, we saw that the change was already there. Millions of people already on the street. Many people have been wondering what happens in the national election in Cambodia in 2013, and the opposition received 45% of the vote at that time. But quickly that just gone away. Mm-hmm. So, and subsequently you were forced to exile. Your deputy, President Mr. Kamsukha, also was arrested very shortly after. So can you feel us as the people in America, it's hard to keep up all the politics happening in Cambodia. Can you feel us what happened at that time and that forced you to where you are today?
The national election, which took place in July 2013, was a big success for the CNRP. You mentioned that the CNRP collected 45% of the popular vote. Actually, it was much higher. Because of irregularities, very serious irregularities as noted by independent international observers, there was a large-scale cheating. The election were manipulated in favor of the ruling party of Mr. Hun Sen. Had the election been a little bit more transparent, the CNRP would have won those elections. This explained why Mr. Hun Sen was very afraid of the CNRP. He knew that with such a momentum, the CNRP would win any election that would come out later. It is why, after another election that was the local election, the CNRP collected again some 45% of the popular vote. And again, there was widespread cheating. And then Mr. Hun Sen was sure that for the 2018 election, 1 year later, the CNRP would definitely win. It is why Mr. Hun Sen decided to dissolve our party, dissolve in a very arbitrary and unconstitutional way. He found it convenient to accuse Mr. Kamsukha after my resignation in February 2017. Mr. Kamsukha was the new president. Actually, I resigned because I wanted to preserve the CNRP. Mr. Hun Sen has pushed for the adoption of a very special law to ban any political party led by what he called a convict. I had been sentenced to heavy sentences, jail sentences, etc. And had I stayed in my position as president, the party would have dissolved. Then I decided to step down, and Mr. Kum Sokha took over. But eventually, the party was dissolved anyway.
Had you thought that the decision to resign was a wrong move?
No, because the party would have been dissolved had I not resigned. I thought I would preserve the party from being dissolved, but Mr. Hun Sen has already taken his decision to dissolve the party anyway. It is why, after my resignation, there was another election, the commune election, then widespread irregularities, but still we continue to collect a very high percentage of the popular vote. And there was another election, the national election in 2018, July 2018. So Mr. Hun Sen knew very well that with such a momentum, we would win a landslide victory because the popular support was so strong. It is why Mr. Hun Sen decided to dissolve the CNRP, not to allow our party to take part in the 2018 national election.
Now, what is your hope? I understand recently the country passed another law that not allowing people with let's say 2 citizenships hold top 4 position in the country. You knew that this gonna come, I assume. So what's your thought at this point to remedy your way back as the leader of a party into the country?
It doesn't change anything. It doesn't affect me anyway. I am prepared and ready to give up my French citizenship before becoming a prime minister if I am elected prime minister by a majority of national deputy members from the CNRP. Then I would give up my French nationality in order to comply with this newly adopted law. But I think this law is unfair, and it would not help the country because I'm not speaking for me only. I'm thinking of many other Cambodians who have a second nationality and who could become the next prime minister or the next National Assembly speaker, the next Senate speaker, the next president of the Constitutional Court, the Supreme Court. So it is a pity to limit the scope, to limit the possibilities for Cambodians all over the world who have a second nationality, the nationality of the country they have been living in. So I think it would not encourage young people, the new generation, to participate in politics and to determine the future of our country.
As a result of the dissolution of the CNRP in 2017, 2018, we know that the ruling party took all 100% of the seats. It's a one-party state in Cambodia since 2018. Do you think in this upcoming election in 2023, will CNRP be allowed to participate in this election, or because some expert opinions, such as Brad Adam, director of Asia Watch, he recommended that people should boycott, actually, in fact, this coming election ahead of time. What is your thought of that? I know you just tour around the US. working on getting CNRP restored? What is the path for the opposition at this point?
Any election without participation of the CNRP, which is the only credible opposition party, such an election without the participation of the CNRP would be meaningless, would be illegitimate, would be a fake election. So, of course, we would not participate, and we call on all parties, every citizen, not to participate in any fake election, because a fake election without the participation of the opposition would lead the country or would maintain the country in a one-party state, one-party system, which is just the opposite of a democratic system. It is a return for Cambodia. It's a return to a one-party system, as like under the communist rule. So it depends on the type of election we are going to see. If the next election has any meaning, we should see the CNRP participate. But if the CNRP is not allowed to participate in such election, then such election would be illegitimate.
Speaking about allowed or not allowed, I recall you have been summoned to court along with your top senior officer as well. And as you try to make your way back, you were not allowed to go back, including Madame Musukor, who's your deputy vice president. So that makes me wonder, just like the public, the rest of people in the public, that's like, what is going on?
I think this can be easily explained by the fear of Mr. Hun Sen. Mr. Hun Sen does not want to see the participation of the CNRP. He has been trying to eliminate the CNRP from Cambodia's political scene. But this is ridiculous. It is too easy, ludicrous, to eliminate a party just by declaring it dissolved. It is why the international community, including the US, has been pushing for the reinstatement of the CNRP, because there is no ground to dissolve the CNRP. Hun Sen took the pretext of Mr. Kum Sokha's being accused of sedition, of wanting to overthrow his government with the support of the US. But all this is fallacious. So Mr. Hun Sen and his court have to drop such an accusation on Mr. Kum Sokha. Therefore, there is no ground to dissolve the CNRP. The CNRP must be reinstated and must be allowed to take part in any future election. The key to Cambodia's political crisis is very easy. It is to the reinstatement of the CNRP. I hope that all friends of Cambodia all over the world will push Mr. Hun Sen to stop harassing the opposition. It depends, and we should pay respect for the will of the people. The CNRP is dissolved. It is only dissolved on paper. But if you ask the ordinary Cambodian all over the country, all over the world, including the Cambodian diaspora, they all continue to support the CNRP. The CNRP is vibrant, remain alive in the hearts of countless Cambodian people.
Since the dissolution of the opposition party, there has been the continuous crackdown on human rights defenders, environmental activists, journalists, and in large numbers,
CNRP activists also.
Activists, yes. 2 weeks ago, that Prime Minister Hun Sen just assumed the role of the chairman of the ASEAN 2022, and with the release of Rong Chun and several of a couple dozens of activists, people thought that he may be doing it to soften his political image. Instead, a couple days after, he summoned 50 more people also who were CNLP supporters. What is your message at this point to the international community?
I would ask them to continue to pay attention to the situation in Cambodia and to ensure the respect for fundamental rights for the Cambodian people. The most fundamental right is the right to live. We must condemn assassinations of CNRP supporters and activists, and those CNRP activists show that the CNRP is very alive, and Mr. Hun Sen continue to intimidate, to jail, and to kill CNRP activists. And as you have just mentioned, other people from other segments of the population, such as the youth, the artists, the environmentalists, journalists, rights defender, land right defender, have been oppressed, have been intimidated. It means that the whole Cambodian population are revolted. They want a change, and Mr. Hun Sen continues to crack down on the Cambodian population. So there are symbolic gesture on the part of Mr. Hun Sen to show that he has softened his policy, but in fact the repression is still there. The atmosphere of fear, intimidation is still there. So the international community will not be fooled by Mr. Hun Sen. Of course, being president of ASEAN for 2022 year, the coming year, Mr. Hun Sen wants to improve his image, but it is not enough to release Mr. Rong Chun alone. But there are countless other political prisoners, and the atmosphere of fear and intimidation is still there. We continue to live in exile, not only in democratic countries where we can express ourselves, but in neighboring countries such as Thailand. Hun Sen's police continue to harass us, and some of our supporters have been arrested and forcibly sent back to Cambodia recently. And the UN has protested against this violation of human rights. So the whole picture is rather worrying. I hope that the pressure will continue to be exerted on the Hun Sen regime.
ASEAN, last year, conference in ASEAN, the state member discussed the idea of cutting Cambodia loose because Hun Sen aligned himself with China. But this year, as Cambodia is taking turn as the next chairmanships for the 2022 year, everybody seems to jump on the wagon and support him, look forward to support him through this role, although they have been strongly criticized for his human rights and the oppression of the opposition. In your view, Cambodia, so are there enough effort in pushing for the restoration of the CNLP?
I don't think that other ASEAN members, the European countries, which took part in the recent summit meeting in Cambodia, really support the Hun Sen regime. They have to accept the fact that among ASEAN countries, there is a rotating presidency. So it happened to for Cambodia to be the chair of ASEAN the coming year. But it would not entail that Hun Sen can make his regime more respectable or more acceptable. For instance, ASEAN consider that it is the role of ASEAN now to help Burma or Myanmar becoming a respecting democratic principles. But with Hun Sen as president, with Cambodia as president of the ASEAN, ASEAN cannot fulfill this role, intermediary role to help restore democracy in Myanmar, because Hun Sen himself has undermined democracy in Cambodia. So how come he would be able to help restore democracy in Myanmar?
Along a line with Myanmar, Myanmar has established something called Commission of Inquiry, an independent citizens' inquiry that have been a powerful tool to help bring, justice in life. And recently, on the October 23rd this year, Commission of Inquiry for Cambodia was launched. What is your opinion on this?
We have to deplore the fact that there is no cooperation whatsoever on the part of the military junta in Myanmar. In spite of many protests by the international community, the military regime in Myanmar doesn't comply to any call for liberalization. They don't allow any international visitor, including the special envoy of ASEAN, to meet with Aung San Suu Kyi. So this is unacceptable, because in order to restore democracy in Myanmar, you need to establish a dialogue between all concerned parties, and one of the main concerned party is the opposition, led by Aung San Suu Kyi. So if there is no freedom for Aung San Suu Kyi, if there is no possibility for any international envoy to meet with her, and also the military government in Myanmar refused any dialogue with the opposition. So I have no illusion that any progress could be achieved if the Burmese government remains so stubborn. So we have to concentrate our effort and not be fooled by any dictatorship, the one in Myanmar and the one in Cambodia.
I think since I haven't talked to you since before the 2013 election, at the time you were preparing to go back to Cambodia, and I was the last person to ask you, are you ready to go back?
But I did.
And then you did say you were ready to go
back.
Yes, you did.
Only say, but I did go back.
Yes. And it was a huge momentum. And I know that since your exile, you also have been looking for ways to go back. I've been watching you, all the airports that blocked you, not allowing you entering. Are you making any progress on this?
We will continue to attempt to go back. By doing so, we will expose the contradiction in Mr. Hun Sen's position. On the one hand, he said, I am a culprit. I have been sentenced to years in prison. Many arrest warrants have been issued against me. Hun Sen says that he wants to arrest me. But when I go back, I declare that I'm going back to Cambodia. He just sent an opposite message. He says, don't come. We don't allow you to come. He has banned airline companies from carrying me back to Cambodia. he has asked Thailand to block me in Thailand, not to allow me to cross Thai soil to come back by land to Cambodia. He has threatened the Cambodian population not to welcome me. He has mobilized tens of thousands of policemen, soldiers to block me at the border and to tightly control the situation around Phnom Penh. So he actually shows his fear that he's afraid of the CNRP leadership going back to Cambodia. But it contradicts with his previous statement that he wanted to arrest us. But when we want to come back, we prepared ourselves to go back. He doesn't allow us to go back. So this is just ridiculous. It shows that Hun Sen is really afraid, not only of the CNRP, but of the Cambodian people, because the Cambodian people supports the CNRP.
Among these 42 people that he just called, posted, the notice was posted at the for sale headquarters of
Yes.
the CNRP. Actually, your name was on the list.
Yes.
What and among your some top senior official who in the United States. What is your plan in responding to this call at this point?
Our plan, it is not only our plan, but our daily action is to continue to mobilize the population to keep alive the hope for a democratic change. Hun Sen is not eternal. I think there are considerable facts and events that is pushing for the restoration of democracy in Cambodia. I see 4 factors in pushing for a change in Cambodia. First, Hun Sen is getting older. The Hun Sen of today is not the same Hun Sen as the one 10 years ago. I think all of us should realize that it is an end to our life, or to our active life, to our political life. And I think Hun Sen is preparing, because it would be foolish on his part to continue to behave as if he were eternal. Second, the pressure from the Cambodian people is becoming stronger and stronger, because the more Hun Sen persecute the people, the more people are determined to bring about a democratic change. The third element is that is pressure in the entourage of Hun Sen amongst his cronies. There are many people who are affected by Hun Sen's policy, especially with the United States. The US has taken a number of measures to blacklist a number of high-ranking CBP officials, and I think the list will get longer because there are many more Hun Sen's cronies who have been responsible for human rights abuse, for corruption, etc., who will continue to be blacklisted. So the Hun Sen's cronies are very concerned that they will be the next to be blacklisted. So they blame Hun Sen for creating all these problems for them. And there is also a disagreement on Hun Sen's policy to side with China. China behaves as an enemy of the US. So those among Hun Sen's cronies who have obtained US citizenship, they could be deprived of this citizenship. Naturalization could be revoked because it is a violation of their oath of allegiance to the US. If you support a totalitarian party. If you support or you work with a country like China, which behaves as an enemy of the US, then you violate your oath of allegiance. So those people could lose their US citizenship anytime. It is why they are blaming Hun Sen. Stop behaving like that. Your policy is very detrimental to our interests. And if Hun Sen does not soften his line, I think the pressure will mount against Hun Sen within his own party. And the last element, there is external pressure, because Hun Sen has allowed Cambodia to be an outpost, a military outpost for China. And everybody knows that China is building facilities which can be turned into military facilities anytime. So Hun Sen's policy, his siding with China, represent a threat to neighboring countries. I think the neighboring countries will react, because Hun Sen's policy, pro-China policy, is a threat to their security, to their sovereignty, to their territorial integrity. So they will come together and take strong reaction, which will lead to Hun Sen obliged to change his policy. And if he does not change his policy, to Hun Sen's removal. So all these four elements combined will definitely push for a democratic change in Cambodia.
I meant to end with one more question, but I'm afraid I have two, if you allow me.
Please.
With regard to Cambodia alignment with China, we also understand Cambodia alignment with Vietnam. He signed the treaty in 2005, the Friendship Treaty, and the Triangle Development. It's a grave concern when we compare population, Vietnam population and Mandaluyong province population and Lao population. Only population get to ship is over to Cambodia from Vietnam, because all of these areas are undeveloped on our land and natural resources that make us a gateway for illegal logging, deforestation, for example. And what I'm going to confront you that your narrative back in 2008 and 2013, that to tell Hun Sen to stop working with Vietnam, I think that seemed to have worked. People really share that sentiment. But I haven't heard that from you in your narrative for a while now. Is there a reason that you don't believe that Hun Sen is any longer aligning with Vietnam, or the fact that, as we know, the treaty is still there, he's still working with them? But what is your take on these issues, triangle development?
We have to think in terms of geopolitics, because the issue is not only Cambodia, it's not only relations between Cambodia and Vietnam. It's much broader than that. It involves many other countries, powerful countries, regional powers, China, the US, Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, Australia, and you can go until India. All those countries are concerned by the expansionism of China, the aggressive policy of China. And because Hun Sen sides with China, this is a source of concern for those countries I have just mentioned, because their security and actually regional peace is at stake. So they will force Hun Sen to stop siding with China, and they will put all kind of pressure on the Hun Sen regime in Cambodia. It's a question of priority, of course, or the issue that you have mentioned, the relation with Vietnam, still exists. But I think this will be overlapped by this much bigger issue. So we have to deal with the most important issue first.
Finally, with your tour in the US, did you accomplish your mission that you were trying to do, and what were they?
I have to do my best in any circumstances. I am satisfied and I'm proud of the Cambodian community. They understand the situation very well and they are very hopeful. For the reasons that I have just exposed, they believe that there will be a democratic change in the near future in Cambodia. And for that to become true, they are supportive of the CNRP. And at the same time, the message that we have received from the US administration is very encouraging. The sanctions that the US has taken against some of the Cambodian officials are very encouraging. We are very grateful to the US to take those sanctions. It is the first time that the dictators, their cronies, those who have created so much suffering to the Cambodian people, it is the first time that those people are sanctioned. And the first country that has taken sanction against those people is the US. We are very grateful to the US for that.
Okay. Finally, I think our interview coming to the end. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Subin Pin, and thank you, Mr. Sam Rainsy, for being with us today. Thank you.
Pleasure.